morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome wherever you are to Global Atheist News Review. This is not like the news itself, which I try to deliver in an unbiased way. This is where we actually get to express our views on the news. Now, this week's opinionated panel members include Dr. Ty Wells and Swedish Steve, who has come out from behind the glass dividing wall that producers normally hide the other side of. We've had a couple of apologies from our panel members. Unfortunately, Dread Pirate is working today, so he was not able to make it, but he's promised to come next week. And sadly, Esther is a bit poorly under the doctor, as they say, so she's had to pull out as well. Never mind. We've got two key people here to give me their views on the news. And we're going to start with an item about the Pope, because he has finally, this is the actual Pope, he has finally come out with a sort of thinly veiled criticism of Putin. Now, we haven't had much from the leadership of the churches on the Ukrainian war at the moment. But this time, in the last few days, the Pope has said, once again, some potentate, mentioning no names, sadly caught up in anachronistic claims of nationalist interests, is provoking and fomenting conflicts, while ordinary people sense the need to build a future that will either be shared or not be at all. So what do you think about that? That's a change of stance by the Pope.
I'll start. I just say, like, I never paid attention to what the Pope was saying beforehand, but, you know, even if it's thinly veiled, I think it's a good thing. And I can continue to more or less ignore a majority of his sayings after that.
Fair enough.
Not the Pope fan, I hear.
Yeah, I've not subscribed to him. In fact, if you look at Twitter, he has less subscribers than Kanye West. And there's a fun game we used to play at my last job called "What's the Last Tweet the Pope and Kanye West Gave?" And the Pope's tweets are like an Autobot sort of thing, where it's just like, remember to eat your vegetables. Remember, kids, Christ is the one true answer. And Kanye West tweets are always like, how are you going to charge this much money for shrimp? And it's always just a much more enjoyable experience, which is why he has millions of more followers, in my opinion.
Steve.
Yeah, I liked the childish, I would say, wordplay with either we have it together or nobody will have it. Yes. It feels like I'm doing to my 5-6-year-old students in school. Like, if you can't play with it together, I will take it away.
Yes. Play nicely or don't play at all. Yes.
Yeah. No, right. He could have extended and saying that Putin, you're don't do this, or
right.
Or...
He could have been. Yes, he could have been much more forthright, couldn't he?
It could have been an unbiased endorsement of the invasion too, and I'm just glad, like, it wasn't that. If anything, even if it's weak and limp, it's not like we've had to worry about them making any incredibly forward strong movements recently. So, like, let them continue to be a limp fish. Hopefully it dies out over time and people will start following Kanye West and we can just move forward.
No, don't follow Kanye West.
You should follow Kanye West. That guy makes great music. Listen, that guy knows what he's doing. We can have a conversation after this. Better than following the Pope. You know, they did a Jeopardy game too. There's a really great satire called Kanye West and the Pope Play Jeopardy. Here's a guy on the Pope, doesn't know how to pay taxes, doesn't know how to run business, basically sells false hope. Kanye West has to actually produce his stuff. He works for that and he pays taxes on it afterwards. He's also he's married. He knows how to keep his wife happy, has a kid. Like, that guy's rearing children, doing a lot of progressive things for the universe. Pope, not so much. Just saying.
No, indeed, yes. Well, he gets my vote over the Pope, definitely. You made a good point there. Meanwhile, another religious leader, this is the former Archbishop of Canterbury, not the current one. This is a guy called Rowan Williams. And he has come out much more strongly. He's urging the senior members of the Orthodox Christian Confederacy, who are not in Russia, not the Russian Orthodox, but all the other ones, Egypt, Greece, Turkey. There's lots of them around the eastern end of Europe and the western end of Asia. And he's urging them to call for an immediate ceasefire in Ukraine and the reopening of diplomatic engagement. In fact, he says that if he were to meet the current Russian Orthodox leader, whose name is Patriarch Kirill, Patriarch, are they trying to give away the fact that they're paternalistic or?
I feel like you're reading me Star Wars fan fiction. It's really hard for me to, whenever someone has a title in front of their name that isn't like plumber or teacher, it's really hard for me to take it serious. So you're saying the Archdeacon Diocese? What was the name, full title again?
Patriarch Kirill. He's trying to be
Patriarch Kirill, and he's not a character in a Star Wars movie. Is this? Okay.
Yeah.
You surely know what a patriarch is, right?
All right. I don't know what a patriarch is. Is that just the lead man of a organization? Is that like?
Yeah, that's the top man.
Top dude.
The giveaway is that he's patronizing. I think that's
Got
the connection there. Anyway,
sorry.
Lord Williams, if he were to meet him, he tells us that he would say, "It's your people who are being killed. It's not foreigners. It's not strangers. It's your people." How do you make sense of that? What are we going to do about it? I would want him to make a statement pressing for a ceasefire immediately.
Good.
So he's going to drum them out of the brownies. They have a group, the World Convention of Christian Churches. What are they called? World Council of Churches.
Yeah.
And he's trying to get a movement to get the Russian branch of the Christian Orthodox Church excommunicated from this council.
I don't think they care, really.
Yeah.
They have always we're doing our thing. You can do your thing, but we are Slavic Orthodox Christian. We do our thing.
Yeah, I'm always wondering to what effect. It's not like we've not seen religions bifurcate in the past. It just makes smaller but more plentiful problems to deal with, right? It's like that enemy you kill in a dungeon that splits into two more slimes, and you kill those and they split.
Yeah.
I'm hoping they get small enough to where they're just more easier to ignore. So whether they, completely lambast them and, just communicate with each other or not, they just culturally become something that we don't deal with as much anymore.
Yeah, wouldn't that be nice? Absolutely. Meanwhile, Pakistan, Pakistan doesn't like to keep its country name out of the headlines for very long. So they have allegedly, got to say allegedly because it hasn't actually been confirmed yet, killed a religious teacher a teacher in a religious school. And the story goes that a rumor was being put around by two girls that one of their relatives dreamt that this woman, this teacher, had committed blasphemy. They didn't witness her committing blasphemy. It was a relative who dreamt that she committed blasphemy. Anyway, that was a good enough reason for them to attack her with a stick and a knife. And apparently she died after her throat was slit. What do you think about that?
Yeah, it's confirmed that the teacher is dead. But the latest news I read was that I will add Frank now. Hello, Frank.
Hi, guys.
Thanks for joining.
That the teacher had business or something with one of the girl's relatives, and this is just a cover-up.
Yes.
Right. Beyond, well, go ahead.
Yeah, I was just going to say that's what they're looking into, because sometimes a personal grudge can be exonerated by getting the person you've got this grudge against, getting them killed for bogus blasphemy.
Just want to throw this out too. Most murders tend to be tend to have aggressive forms of injuries applied to the victim, and like it's pretty clear in this case that this was a lynching, right? And the interesting thing about that is in America, lynching wasn't even a federal crime, I'll put it that way, until just a couple of weeks ago. And so I want to just make a highlight to like the Biden administration for one of the things that I was hoping would be done 100 years ago when it was originally proposed back in 1922. We, on March 29th, just made lynching a federal crime just here in the United States of America. So when we look at Pakistan, we're like, wow, I can't believe that. Imagine the circumstances in USA just to try to get that through, and like how much of a fight that took. I'm glad that we're here. I'm glad that it's at least officially illegal now. Think about that. But also,
that is a very belated change in the law.
Right. Before we point fingers and we're like, hey, things are terrible in Pakistan, I'm really glad that, we're able to catch things up here in like a Western supposedly first world country. So some good news. It's sobering to think that you have to like wait so long for that. But like kidnappings or aggravated assault, all that stuff, lynching included, these are now at least federally illegal and can be prosecuted as such. Whereas before, you could do something like that to this lady and the police would look at it, realize they couldn't find whoever did it, and then move on to the next case. Like this is now something that we're still, as a people, as like a humanity, trying to get an improvement in protections for. And so we'll keep it up.
We want to keep improving the statute book of offences. We've got some pretty silly things that were put on our law book about in the Victorian time, which gives a policeman the power to hide a woman under his cape so that she can have a wee.
Ooh.
Because there weren't any public toilets for women.
Okay. I know some weird English laws. I know you can't wear a puffed collar within 1 meter of a
Buckingham Palace.
Yeah, or something like that, And there's like a YouTuber who's doing it, and he's just like, the cops don't even know that that's illegal. They're just like, what's going on here?
We've got a lot of dead stuff that we want to prune out of the old book. Yeah. So welcome, Frank. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to stick with the UK government now, because it's been humming and hawing on this issue of conversion therapy. All of the medical people, the NHS here and other major psychological bodies have warned that all forms of conversion therapy, where you try to make a person not gay, are unethical and potentially harmful.
And I think they're right.
Yeah, absolutely. Of course they're right. Definitely. But so the government has been, petitions have been made to the government for a couple of years now to try and get them to outlaw the practice of conversion therapy. And they've been dithering and dathering about it. And finally, they decided, they constructed a law, and they were supposed to enact it last week. But on the very day that it was supposed to become law, they decided not to. They decided to drop plans to ban conversion therapy. And then all hell broke loose. So we were supposed to be holding the first ever international LGBT plus conference in London, and 100 organizations that have been scheduled to take part in that in June boycotted it. So this was called the Safe to Be Me conference, and it armed with that campaign, that motion for support for conversion therapy, the government changed its mind.
Good.
So now they have introduced the law to ban conversion therapy, but it's not as simple as it sounds because they've excluded trans people.
Oh, that's funny. So sexuality, and I wonder, I'll throw this out. I know it's for people who are conservative, it's a very confusing thing, but I think the truth is sexuality was never simple to begin with, right?
Absolutely right.
And that's what people are slowly realizing. So that the more you fight against it, the more it's going to be obvious that it's not as black and white as as you think it is, and the amount of power that you're using, this like steel-fisted, like it's got to be like this, it's canceled, you can do it with this but you can't do it with that. All these lines of sand that you're drawing are only obfuscating the fact that you probably have less information on how this actually works in the first place, and shows merely how out of touch the organizations like that are and how underrepresented they are too, because I bet you there's very few trans people who are willing to have a seat at the table, or would be willing to, but never actually had the opportunity to speak up on that.
Now, the fact is, nothing is simple.
Ooh, I love that.
Nothing
That's
is
true.
simple.
So black and white goes out of the window. We want a lot of gray.
Yeah, and the more simple people make things, the more they're trying to sell you something. Just be careful of that too. Right?
Yes.
Got that right.
Okay. Yeah, thanks for that. So moving on to the US of A, there's quite a lot been happening in the US of A in the last week. Florida Governor Ron Desantis, you may have heard of him. So in Florida, the week before last, or sometime recently, they introduced a law that bans classroom instruction on sexual orientation and gender identity.
Sure.
It's been dubbed the Don't Say Gay bill. And so now that bill is being challenged. So there's a court case that is, the plaintiffs say that the law runs afoul of students' First Amendment right to receive information and ideas. They also said the law is unconstitutionally vague, failing to define what discussion is and is not allowed in school, and that it will have the effect of discriminating against lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer students.
Sure. Asexual too. Yeah.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. So what do you think of that? They're getting some pushback in Florida.
I also think in Florida they're getting pushback. That's fantastic. So that means
good news.
Yeah. Good news. There's a whole generation of kids that are going to be voters soon and are going to continue to see an aging party that doesn't represent them. And hopefully, that leads to major changes. 20 years from now, 40 years from now, we'll see. But that's the generation, the one that's fighting now, that will be the voting bloc in Florida. That's the charge. And I'm glad they're outraged.
But isn't this a worrying trend, really? I mean, Texas had, I don't remember the name of the bill, but you can't teach Black history as you wish in Texas. And I know Alabama.
Yep.
I'll tell you straight out, Black history is generally taught fairly poorly in general, and regardless of whatever state you're in. And I'm very tired of people,
but still, it was to erase education from kids and make the state look better. And I believe it's a worrying trend in USA.
Sure. In my book, and we can always talk about this later, but there's always going to be more prevailing trends that I worry about regarding race relationships than what's being taught during Black History Month. Because the fact that there's a month that you feel like you can stop talking about Black history is really the problem for me. But otherwise,
Didn't Morgan Freeman said something really good in 60 Minutes regarding that? Like, can you, as a Jewish person, can your history be told in only a month?
Yeah, and also the shortest month of the year. It's kind of
Yeah.
crazy.
Yes, yes. Well, now you mentioned Morgan Freeman. He's a bit of a hero of mine for what he said about color discrimination, because he said to a white interviewer, he said, "I'm going to ask you to stop calling me black, and I'm going to stop calling you white, and that's how we're going to cure racism."
Yeah, that's the same interview I was talking about. It's genius.
Mm.
For me, going back to nothing's too simple, right? That's on that side. But I'm glad white people love it. I love how people love that sentiment. I think there's a little bit more work that needs to be done. But
Yeah,
all right.
probably. Yeah, he was.
in USA, but
Yes.
but still, if you just stop polarizing this, I talk with my wife about this a lot,
Yeah.
and she thinks the problem is that we see each other as either white or black or whatever,
Yeah. Yeah.
not as a community or entity of human beings.
Sure.
We have to
Yeah. And my thing is, I think you can do both. Well, there's no reason why you can't look at a black person and also see them as a beautiful human being. And I also find value in the idea of there's a celebration that comes with your heritage and a celebration that comes with what you look like, things that you achieve, things that you can attribute to your community. And I'm totally fine if someone wants to see me as a black guy. I just don't want that to come with any troubling connotations. If you can get rid of that, I'm totally fine with it. And then celebrate the fact that I'm a black person. I'm totally cool with that. And I think what we should really change the conversation to is not so much Black History Month is something that we need to get away because it polarizes people. It's more of like, here's an opportunity to celebrate an incredible group of people that help make this country better. Like, I'm totally fine with that. And that's my perspective.
But then,
but again, I don't really want to go into a whole dwelling racism.
Well,
appreciate it.
What I'd like to do.
I'm not the ambassador on how to not to be racist.
No.
I just really want to
have a fun
conversation. Appreciate it.
Yeah, we understand that, but I do want to mention that the Times of Northwest Indiana has reported that Senator Mike Braun, Republican, told reporters in a conference that he would support the Supreme Court overturning the 1967 Loving versus Virginia decision, which struck down state bans on interracial marriage. Now, this means that he's okay with people getting married across the racial mythical barrier in other states, but when they come to Indiana, he's going to tell them they're not officially married there. Now,
I'm just delighted for that example that not all wackos come from Kentucky.
Yes, wackos, yes. Well, I have a sort of a personal angle on this because I married an African woman and I've got mixed children as a result of it. And that's not abnormal at all in the UK. Yeah, we are a mixed cosmopolitan society and we don't judge a book by its cover, for the most part. Obviously, there will be pockets of bigoted people, but for the most part, it's not exceptional to see mixed race families and in-betweenies in the offspring.
And it's really not that exceptional here in the United States, except in the minds of some people.
Yes.
But I can't speak for all Americans. That's for sure. And they'll tell you, don't let Hole talk for me. But when I see mixed couples on the street, I see couples. When my kids have come to us and said, "Well, what do we call black people?" And I said, "Well, I call them people." And that's for the circle of acquaintances that I'm in. Most of them feel the way I just said it, but America's full of crazy thinking people. I don't mean they're insane. I mean they understand stuff differently.
Yes, that's a good way of putting it. So before we leave America, Oklahoma they've just finally approved a legislation to make performing an abortion a felony, punishable by up to 10 years in prison and a fine of $100,000. And the only exception to this would be if the mother's life is at stake. What do you think of that?
Ludicrous.
Well, yeah, I can't imagine any state legislature in the United States. I can't imagine Mississippi, any of them passing that. It'll be interesting to see, but I really don't think anything will come of it. I certainly hope nothing comes of that.
Right.
Well, it was passed on a vote of 74 to 14 against.
By what group passed that?
Republicans.
Republicans, yeah, but that isn't enough to make
the House.
Yeah, the Oklahoma House.
The representatives. Yeah. And so it's now gone to the Republican governor, whose name is Kevin Stitt. And he's previously said he would sign any anti-abortion bill that comes to his desk. So look forward to that happening next week or sometime.
Surely, if they vote this in as law, that will become a Supreme Court issue. And maybe that's the purpose of that. Maybe what's really behind the motive behind this.
What's really wanted, what we really need is federal protections for abortion across.
Absolutely.
We have some, they're very low, but that doesn't mean they couldn't be increased. And I think if we continue, I actually feel like we're regressing in terms of polarization in the United States. It was really, really scary, a couple of years ago. Now things are just really scary, if I can put it that way. Russia seems to have, if anything, given us a common enemy to look at. So we're not necessarily pointing at each other as much anymore. But I think there's really good opportunities for legislation at the federal level to stop spending as much time on these tasks in terms of removing rights for women and then protecting rights for women. And I think if they would just transition towards that, I think we could have honestly a much more egalitarian society that we're obviously trending towards, but just not at the rate that anyone's satisfied with.
Absolutely. Well, that's gone through the House of Representatives of Oklahoma. It already had been through the Senate of Oklahoma. So we're just waiting for the governor to sign it. And that, obviously, I will be reporting on this in the future. And hopefully there will be some pushback. But that's the state of Oklahoma for you.
Let me add one more thing, too. Outrage is a good thing, because if this happened and no one cared about it, no one reported on it, no one wanted to fight this, protest this, that's when hope dies. The fact that we're upset isn't a bad thing. That's actually a sign that a good thing's happening. And if anything, it's the first glimmers of change that's going to happen. And so it's just for us not only to be patient, but for us to continue to stoke that fire and make that change actually into fruition. So we can be outraged by it, but don't let that take away any hope that you have in the future. Just try to turn it into a productive sense of meaningful, in your case, if you're outside the United States, advocacy. And if you are in the US, voting, going out and voting. And we do have a voting session coming up. So make sure that you're educated in who are the people and what their positions are, and you make a meaningful impact coming up in the next couple of months.
That's a good appeal. Absolutely. So moving across the border to Canada, the Pope, again, Pope Francis, has been active. He's actually apologized, would you believe, to a Canadian Indigenous delegation because of the Catholic Church's role in the country's residential school system. I don't know if you know this news item. It's been rumbling on for weeks or months even. These schools operated for more than a century, and they were run by the government, but actually the Catholic Church was in control of a lot of them, 70% of them. And their remit was to try and destroy the culture of the native Indians of Canada and assimilate them into the general homogeny of Canadian. But he's actually apologized. He's suddenly realized that it wasn't wasn't a good thing, because these children were abused, and you should see the numbers of graves in the school grounds. It's a real horror story.
Yeah, it really was, and the researcher or the government response. No, the person sent from the government that said, I believe it's many more graves we will uncover.
Yes.
It was that segment was really creepy.
Well, I screened a little MP4 that you kindly ripped for me, Swedish Steve, and I'm not ashamed to say that it made me well up. I had watery eyes. I didn't screen all of it because of that. So it is very belated, and I'm afraid, sorry, the apology, Popey, doesn't cut much mustard.
No.
Moving on to the UK, you'll be pleased to hear that we are not immune to religious harm in this country. So we've had a teacher suspended from a top state grammar school. This is the Colchester Royal Grammar School in Essex, which last year had more students offered places in Oxford and Cambridge than any other grammar school in the UK. And the teacher has been suspended because he's got a coffee mug with a picture of Muhammad on it. And he walked out of the playground, and a picture was taken, a video was taken of him holding this mug with Muhammad depicted on it.
Weird, silly question. Is a grammar school a private school? Is it elementary school? What is that?
It's a state-funded school that's modelled on our private school system. So it's the top tier of the state-funded school.
Got it. So it's publicly funded, right? People's taxes. So like, if you're a Muslim, your taxes would go to this school. Is that accurate?
Yeah.
Then yeah, I can see that as more grounds for being upset about it. Yeah.
We don't have many of them left. They've been trying to get rid of these on grounds of equality, because I went to one, actually. I was lucky enough to. It was selective entry. You only got to go there if you passed the entry examination. And back in those days, we had lots of them. And the idea was that everybody should be entitled to a chance of what we call a public school education, independent school education. And so it shouldn't be restricted to the rich.
Yeah.
So
I'll throw out an opinion. Let me know if I'm wrong. If this is a private school, I don't care. Like, you're paying into that, do whatever you want. But if it's a public school and there's like a Muslim community or even a single person who's paying taxes, and some of that's going to this school, and one of the teachers has like a really offensive thing about your culture or your religion on it, like that I see as like, hey, if I'm in part paying for this, I don't want that to be represented in the leadership there, right? Like that, I feel like I could have a grounds for it. Whereas if it's a private institution, it's like, well, that's not a part of me. I can't control it. I'm not going to force that person to get rid of the mug because I'm not in any way invested to it. Or give me the option to take my taxes away from that school. And if you're not going to give me that, then get rid of the person.
I see that.
That's my opinion.
I see that distinction. But is a picture on a mug a good enough reason to dismiss a teacher?
No.
It's isolated. Sure, I'll put it this way: isolated. It's ink on a piece of ceramic, right? But it's the person who's holding it that's the problem for me. It's not the drawing. At least if I was Muslim, and I have a Muslim sister, I'm just saying, it's not so much the drawing; it's the attitude that someone who's in charge can actually walk around with that. And what's that guy think about the culture? Like in my head, it's an indication of like the mindset of a leadership team that I'm in part paying money to, that I have a problem with. You can put that, if he didn't have that mug, let's say he left that at home and just walked through the school and was like, yeah, by the way, Islam is full of S and I hate, and he just starts saying some really bad slurs, I'd still have a problem. So it's not the mug, it's not the drawing, it's just the attitude. I can see it if it's a public institution and if I'm paying money into it, If I can't take my money back, if you won't refund that money back to me, then you have a problem where this leadership issue needs to be resolved.
But how much money do you believe you have given it in taxes, just that institute?
I don't want to put a dollar sign on like the idea of like, listen, I'm a minority. I can't change the system. I can't get back the money. And maybe I'm not offering as much as other people who are completely conventional with that idea or that mindset. My idea is like, if I can't control where my money goes, then I want to have an impact at least to make sure that the system that I'm paying into isn't toxic against me. Right. And I feel like I do have a right to have that. I think it's an easy enough thing not to carry that attitude and conduct yourself with some degree of professionality. You can still have that in your personal life, but if you're representing yourself at a public school that's being paid for by state taxes, you have an obligation to represent the state in the best way, including all members in it. My opinion.
There's two issues here. There's giving out a message that the school has an attitude towards something, and there's shouldn't it be okay to print images of anybody? You know, because it's the Islamic religion that specified we mustn't print pictures of their prophet. Is that reasonable?
Yeah.
I only really have an issue with the first one. Like, you represent a state, do so equally for everybody, or don't do it at all. And if you can't do it, you're not fit for the position. Either rectify your behavior or don't hold that position, period.
But just because it's funded by tax, it's not a public position. It's just a teacher and an individual teacher that has the right to express something or not express something.
I know you have a much more higher attitude. Like, if someone was making a joke personally against you, that it wouldn't be a big deal. Though I would just say, like, it shouldn't have to be the case that there's a teacher walking around with, like, for example, a really offensive picture of your mother on it. Like, that shouldn't be a concept that exists by a principal or a leadership of some school. Like, that shouldn't be the mindset that's portrayed where it's okay to do that by someone who's representing of a body of people. Like, I'm just saying we can hold ourselves to a higher standard there. And
yes.
I think we're obligated to do so if we decide to take a position of leadership to that degree. Otherwise, if you don't like that, have a private organization where you don't represent everybody, who people pay in directly to you, and you can conduct yourself any way you want. That's the free market. I support that. But I don't think free speech comes without freedom of consequences.
But why do you feel he is representing people?
I think that's pretty obvious. I feel like I also covered it. I really don't have anything else to cover.
In Canada, this has become a big issue because some of the atheist organizations there have tried, they've succeeded. It's in Quebec, which is one of the states of Canada. They've succeeded in passing a law that forbids state employees to overtly wear a cross around their neck or any other symbol that represents their allegiance to a religion, on the grounds that while they're in the state's pay, they mustn't promote any particular faith, because it looks as though the state is endorsing that particular symbolism. And it's become a big issue there because quite a few people have said you should have the freedom to wear what you want. But if you're being paid for by the state or another organization, if you're being paid by, say, McDonald's, you wouldn't be allowed to wear anything other than McDonald's uniform,
right?
Because they're paying the bill.
Sounds right.
Well, I think we've squeezed the juice out of that one. Moving now to Australia. We don't often get Australia in the news of religious harm causing, but there's a couple of items this week. Firstly, the Australian Anglican Church in Queensland, they are accused of child sex abuse claims at liabilities of over $39 million, dating back to, I don't know when, the 1800s. And what have they done? Well, they've shifted all of their historical child sex abuse liabilities into the aged care organization, because they, as a sort of side business, they offer residential care to the aged, and that's funded by the local, by the government, by Sydney government. And so what they've managed to do is sort of hive off the responsibility for their child abuse to a state-funded side organization of the Anglican Church in Australia. That's a cunning move, isn't it?
Yeah. I've only heard about that like in movies from America. How can that be okay? How can it be legal? How can it be within the rules of society?
Indeed. So the experts there have suggested that other so-called not-for-profit organizations could be engaged in similar activities, trying to deflect their child abuse liabilities so that the state actually pays for them.
I'm going to throw out two other random things too. This is going back to when we were trying to find good places to donate money during our donations to Ukraine. And we found that there's a lot of religious organizations that crop up when you do a Google search for how to donate to Ukraine. And there's Catholics for supporting Ukraine and Christians mission for blank. And they're all just, sites that are local churches just wanting to get more money. And you have no idea where the money goes because they don't have to report it. We have laws here that say you don't have to report where that funding goes, especially if it's not going to a for-profit or a nonprofit. It's really unfortunate. And so along with that, I'm looking at this and just seeing, highly advanced money laundering that shouldn't be legal in the first place. Again, taxpayer funded, even if it's 1 cent, 1% of 1 cent. I should have a say of where that money goes if it's being used on my behalf, right? Otherwise, fix your system. Or give me my money back and let me completely devalue myself from the system and turn yourself into a private entity. I feel like a taxation without representation is like the cornerstone of one of the main things we at least ideally want to have in a society, right?
What they've managed to do there, because they set up this Anglicare residential home system for the elderly to make themselves look good. And they got state funding for it, and now what they've done is they've moved over the state funding to pay the fines and the liabilities for their historic child abuse. Anyway, guys, I want to bring it to a close here because it's been rather a dark episode of religious harm this week, and I'm sorry that I wasn't able to find a lighter item to finish with. But there you go. That's the nature of the beast.
Yeah.
Any final words, any of you?
Work harder to find good news.
Okay.
Got a week to do it.
Yes, okay. I'll try harder. Thanks for the input anyway. Thanks very much for being in the show.
Cool.
Bye-bye.
Take care.